Hello, my name is Paul Zanazanian, and welcome to History in the Now Conversations, a podcast on history and how we use it in our everyday lives. History in the Now Conversations explores how we use history to know who we are, to know how to think and feel, and to know how to engage in our daily routines. History in the Now Conversations examines what history is, what it does, and how we can use it or even should use it in our everyday lives. Today's guest is Emmanuel Tabi, an assistant professor in the Department of Integrated Studies and Education at McGill University. Dr. Tabi's work focuses on intersectional Black studies frameworks, strong arts-based and community-engaged scholarship within Black communities, and working with school boards to address issues of equity, positioning him at the cutting edge of crucial education conversations and school-community-university collaborations in Canada. Emmanuel, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here today, so welcome. Could you please tell us a little more about who you are and what you do in terms of your work?
I'm working on a few different things. Right now, I'm just wrapping up a community project with OBAC, the Oya Black Arts Coalition, and we were given funds by the Canada Media Fund to do research on the experiences of emerging Black filmmakers nationally. So that was an exciting project. Getting to hear from not only Black emerging filmmakers, but also hearing from educational directors and community leaders who support emerging Black filmmakers and their varying experiences across the country. Another project I'm working on is looking at how Black spoken word poets in Montreal use their cultural production to speak to their emotional life, and then also what we can learn from them when thinking about education, when thinking about teaching, and also when thinking about Black life, right? So their work is fantastic and important, and often the very pulse of our community, right? A lot of these poets are not only representing themselves, but people they care about. And so you hear so many stories and think about, like Black feminist thought and such, the importance of storytelling, right? And centralizing Black voices, particularly when talking about Black issues.
So what led you to do the kind of work that you do? Because all these projects seem very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to do the work that you do?
One thing is I was a spoken word poet for 14 years.
Oh.
I say was because I still write, but I don't really perform. It's like for my kids and jazz, right? But
Jazz is your wife?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, for the right.
Not jazz music, but your wife, yes.
Thanks.
That's actually romantic.
A little bit. I like it. And one thing I noticed in working with folks is in our community is there are a lot of folks that in the spoken word community who were creating after school programs. But then when you talk to these folks, you also see that they might have dropped out of high school. Quite a few of them had. Yet they still saw the importance of education. And right there's that departure between schooling and education. And that reality exists for many Black folks. So we see the importance of education. It's just the vehicle in which it's presented to us is difficult. And I was like, wow, okay. And so, you see the transference even from the cultural production of rap music, where some folks would identify the cipher as being big shout out to Remy. And he said it like this. He said, it's kind of like a metaphysical space of healing, right? Where you gather with other folks who are from a similar experience and you're able to freestyle, right? Because when you freestyle, it's like your subconscious comes out. So there's nowhere to hide, fewer places to hide. And you have that happening, but you're also having that happen in school. So a teacher might just hear kids doom, right, on a locker with their fists, and that's disrupting their class. But right there, those people are creating a space, and within a space that they might feel marginalized within. Oftentimes, right? They might feel unwelcome. But within that space, they still create a space. And then when they break apart, that space continues till the next time they come together, right? And so all these things and all these questions are happening. And I decided to, for my PhD work and continuing even now to look at that, like we're able to create these metaphysical spaces, as Remy said, with anywhere we are. But when you think about Black history, right, and what we have to survive continually, and at any point you gather with other folks of a similar reality, and you're able in that moment to share a moment of trust, a moment of compassion. An outsider looking in might not see it that way, but what are we experiencing? And when you're centering the experiences of Black folks, there's a whole new lens and a whole new perspective to a gathering of what some folks might deem as some loud Black kids. No, in that moment, there's joy, right? There's courage, because you know somebody's going to tell you to be quiet, but you're like, I need this, right? And even talking to other youth, like why, talking about sometimes why they have their headphones on all the time, right? And thinking about, their rap music, it's like it allows them to almost take on a superhero identity, especially when you're a teenager and your emotional toolkit at times could be still evolving. But the bus driver might call you the N-word. Or somebody might, it's so dehumanizing. And I live this. When you're walking, just minding your own business, and somebody sees you, goes, and grabs their purse and brings it close to them. And so your headphones are kind of like, it blocks out everything else, and you could go into your own world. And you're just trying to get to school.
It's like a safe space.
It's a safe space.
Right.
So it could be, right? I'm not saying everybody wearing a headphone, but these are kind of the explanations for some of the things we see here, and then also the connection to the music that we listen to.
Yeah.
Right? And that music is so important to folks. I mean, you see folks taking, even right now with Kendrick Lamar and Drake, you see people taking like a hard stance or one or the other, right? And because these folks, their music connects with people in a certain way. I've said it in the past where like even Drake, like the way he connects with folks with his music, and Kendrick does this too, and other culture producers, but sometimes you could feel like the ones that really go in and talk about their emotional life through their culture production, there's a connection. And to some folks that feel that they're going through something that nobody else is going through, and you hear that an artist says something and it's like, wait, I feel that way. Wait, they understand. They could understand what I'm going through. So when you go to their concert, you have people crying in the audience because it's like, I connected with you and you're here, right? So there's a lot going on.
That's interesting.
A lot going on. Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about the metaphysical space. And when I talked about safe space, I was thinking of that metaphysical space. Is this space one focus of your research interests?
Yeah.
Like to understand how it works, and then maybe to find ways to help teachers in schools understand what it is so that they don't scream and say, stop making noise? Yeah.
I mean, or also, is there a space where these kids could come to, like, it's weird, right? Because if we're like, okay, we have this classroom, it's a quote unquote safe space. Really, the safest space for the youth I have and I'm in conversation with, the safest space is the space they choose, right? Like, there's a reason they choose their space, or there's a, in the corner of the playground away from everyone else, right? You're like, oh, why are these kids so far? I say, stay over here. But they want to be away from everything else just for a moment. Just for a moment, right? A place of peace. And so is the metaphysical space part of my research? I think the connection to our emotional lives and how we use these spaces to heal, to be happy, to transform a moment, a day. You know what I mean? Like, you could be having a really rough day or a series of rough days or rough weeks, but you have moments and pockets that are super beautiful with people that care about you, right? And when you hear about the narratives of Black students, sometimes, they could go through a day at school and not feel like there's a caring adult, right? So you create it with your friends, right? It's complex. It's complex, and I don't know if there's like an answer, and I don't know if I'm looking for an answer, but more so an explanation of what's happening. And it's one of the explanations that are happening, as are told by the youth, right, or from young people, as opposed to us trying to like just sit down and figure it out. Ask them, and it's a fascinating and fantastic place to be. And you're like, wow, I didn't think about it like that.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful topic, actually.
Thank you.
And it's a topic that you don't always come across. So it's very specific and significant.
Yeah.
And there seems to be this attachment to it also on your behalf. Do you feel like a sense of responsibility or duty to help these kids? Is there, or are you more interested, or is the drive? I'm sure it's complex, and you're going to say that it's multifaceted. But is the drive coming from a space where you need to help and get the message out, or is it also coming from your pure curiosity about the workings of social reality and the complexity of our world?
That's a good question. I mean, I was a Black boy, right? And I see, like, folks see, even on campus, right? Like, you see a group of 5, 6 brothers standing around having a conversation. Folks see different things. Some folks might see them as a threat, right? Or what have you. I see them as like me and my friends, and I'd have moments where I walk by and I'm like, yo, bro, what's going on? I'm like, hey, how are you? Right? And folks would be like, oh, you know those guys? I'm like, nope. But I know a little bit about what it's like to be them. And it's I don't know, it's a space that because of my social location, I think I can make that contribution. But also, it's not only me, right? I'm always in conversation with community, and so it's not like, hey, I thought about this great idea and I'm doing all this great work. It's continual conversation, and I give thanks for those that I'm in community with and that are, I could bounce my ideas off of, or like, hey, this situation's happening. So it's always in concert with other folks. Even thinking about like my committee, like I still talk to my folks, right? Big shout out to Rob and Lance and Ruben and all those, Cassie Freeman. There's a number of people that continue to support me and these ideas. And I don't know. I think they're like evolving in a space. And I think that's exciting. I don't know what the end result's going to be, but I've fallen in love with the process and allowing the product to be what it is. Yeah, it's cool. Did that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah. Very interesting. You grew up in Toronto?
Yeah, the GTA, primarily Mississauga. Yeah.
Okay.
Some folks are gonna laugh because I really like Mississauga. Well, my memories of it, but yeah.
So why would people laugh?
Oh, okay. Sauga's like the burbs, you know what I mean? The suburbs and stuff. And I don't know. I like where I grew up, but also I definitely like see the privileges I had. You know what I mean? And that's still something I'm not quite working through, but very aware of, is my experiences are very, 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 very privileged. And so like even again, I always go back to Black feminist thought. It's like my heartbeat, but think about intersectionality, right? Like I understand racial oppression as a Black man, but I also understand male privilege. And I also understand class privilege. And those things that kind of amalgamate to produce who I am or like the way I'm able to navigate certain realities, right? Like I feel very, I guess, lucky, but it's definitely privilege that allows me to even operate within academia the way I do. Like I'm not nervous in the ways that sometimes some of my other friends and colleagues could be, right? And academia is not this big, scary thing to me. But I kind of grew up on a campus, right? And my dad was finishing his PhD when I was a little kid. So, but for some folks I've met, it is, right? And so there are certain difficulties and different realities that I don't experience, and it's directly related to privilege and the opportunities those privileges have given me, right? And some of the work like we did with in my postdoc with Dr. Andrew Allen, like the African Diaspora Youth Conference, is specifically bringing Black youth onto the campus, letting them come and take a class on the campus, and they'll get high school credits. And if they go to the University of Windsor, you also get like a university credit, right? But it demystifies what this place is. And for some folks, like it exists only in their mind. And that could be scary because it could then become anything. It could then become anything, right? And then you have these youth from like grade 9 onto grade 12 coming onto campus and understand, wait a second, right? So let's say they choose to go to that university, like, oh, I was here for a class already, right? And then also what it means to their families and such, right? I'm like, wow, I think I'm going to go to university. It's not as this big, scary, unreachable thing, especially, let's say, if you're a first-generation person going to university, right? You connect to the space differently. Yeah, these are like all the things I'm kind of thinking about, right? Like how do we help folks that are disenfranchised historically connect to spaces they're made to feel? Not only do they feel, but that they're also at times made to feel that it's not for them. Right? What does that look like? And even think about culture production, like at the end of that conference, African Diaspora Youth Conference, like they usually put on a play or a skit talking about their experiences, either dreaming about going to university or what it'd be like. Like some of them, they have free reign, and some of them have like beautiful celebrations about what it'd be like to get into university. And then through that, you get to see how they are conceptualizing and thinking about the space and what it really does mean to them. They might come on acting nonchalant, like, it's not really for me. Then after, a few days of the conference, they have write a play about an acceptance letter and them jumping up and down and screaming, right? So sometimes, some folks might read it as like they're not interested, but in what ways is even that presentation or the mask or that persona used to protect themselves? And so there's a lot going on.
Fascinating.
Yeah. Man, I'm grateful to be part of the conversation.
It's very nice to listen to you.
Oh, it's nice to listen to you too, Paul.
What's the first idea or image that comes to mind when you think of history? And why do you think that image comes to mind?
Define history. Like just the past or how it's been presented to us?
I'm going to leave that up to you for now because we're going to get there, but that's a good question. So, But the first image, the first idea.
A lie.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm like trying to be polite on your podcast, Paul. But yeah, man, like, and a lie for a very particular reason too. Like a lie to empower some and marginalize others. It's Black History Month, but Black history didn't start with slavery, right? That's something that happened. But even if you look at the time where, the transatlantic slave trade began to Jim Crow, right? If you look at it on like a scale and see how big, I presented this in class the other day, and see how big that gap is. And then you see from the quote unquote end of slavery to Jim Crow and see how big that gap is. And then you see how long that's been till now. It's not that long. It's maybe 60 years, right? So in thinking about history, I think it's a huge celebration of for me, Black folks, to see in that time what we've been able to accomplish while still dealing with the oppressions and that have continually been upon us, right? Like
So the lie would be like the constant misrepresentation.
Constantly, right? Like it's yeah. I asked like I've had students tell me that their whole political paradigm would be different if they were learning what they're learning now historically in high school. If they were learning that, or sorry, what they're learning in university, if they learned that in high school, right? Like the complete, that like,
they would feel more empowered, perhaps.
not only empowered, but maybe not have stereotypes in the same ways that they do. You know, even think about like so many of our students don't know about the Chinese head tax or the Kamagata Maru, right? Like think about Sikh and Southeast Asian folks in Canada as a recent experience would be a lie. Same way, like it was illegal for Black folks to come into Canada through Western Canada, right? These are laws, right? These are laws, or the laws. I think it was in Saskatchewan where it was illegal for a white woman to work for quote unquote a Chinese person. Because again, if you're Southeast Asian back then, they just told you're Chinese, right? And so even with that, thinking about how our identities are just pushed to the side and minimized, right? And I think that's the point in history, in the way it's often presented to us, has done that. It minimizes the experiences of folks who are not white men. And that is for a purpose, to empower certain people and marginalize others, right? So I know for myself, like my parents, this was important to them, but if more Black folks knew more about their history, you really know what we've done in this world and what we continue to do, you can't tell us none, right? And I think that's the point. Even when you think about like the British, I can't remember what it was called, but there was a wall, I believe, that was built in modern day, I believe, Nigeria. The British tore it down, or the museums, or our libraries that were burnt down. And so we can't, it's more difficult to connect back to the things that benefit us, right? But even when you think about eating, what are the foods that benefit us? What are the food that's our medicine? And where does medicine start from? Where are we told it starts from, right? Like if we go to the Greeks, then we're being misinformed. It goes beyond that, where the Greeks learned it from. Think about ancient Kush and such. I think that's, everybody should learn about it, because it's not just Black history, it's history, period. So when I think about history, it's like it's misinformed, but for a particular reason. And I think that reason should be also kind of spoken about and highlighted, right? Why are we purposely trying to be led this way? If it wasn't important, and I don't think an entire country, you hear how, what's going down south of us, how they're dealing with quote unquote DEI stuff, right? But anything, like you see banned books and they're just like children's books talking about Black folks' experience, that's banned. No, it's showing our triumph, our joy, our courage, even in the face of the greatest, most dehumanizing experiences and realities. That's where the blues comes from. That's where jazz comes from. That's where spoken word poetry comes from. That's where rock and roll comes from. That's where the courage to, hey, I'm going to make it in tennis. Hey, I'm going to make it in hockey, because I come from a people who constantly overcome these oppressions. Right? I'm going to do these things. I'm going to be the first. I'm going to be Willie O'Ree, and other folks. So, yeah, it shouldn't just be Black history. Like that should just be history, because it is. Right? Yeah, I don't know how we got on that, but
no, it was.
Okay.
It's good. So I'm trying to. I don't know what I'm trying to do, but what I want. So the first image that came to your mind was the idea of the lie, and then our conversation evolved, and we reached to a point of resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming they both go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
One is the flip side of the other, in your understanding.
Well,
in terms of the first idea or image that comes to mind when you think of history?
yeah, I like history as it's presented to us, and then the reality is very different. I think that's why, for example, like indigenous folks, the turtle here on Turtle Island, like the reclaiming of their language, that knowing that it was once illegal to speak their language. Like that, wasn't that the purpose of residential schools, to destroy a culture, right? And culture is language. You can't communicate with your folks, but also the connection of language to the land, right? Where, what does that word really mean? And it connects to something very intentional and purposeful. And that gets lost when there's a specific intentional policy or law created to destroy it. We have an entire government that's focused on doing that. That's history. But you're not going to hear that history if you're not in conversation with indigenous folks and centering their experiences, interacting with this massive, quote unquote, machine, right? Like, yeah, it's.
That's good.
Yeah.
So the first image or idea was the lie.
Yeah.
But now, what is your earliest memory of your connection to history? Is it related to this concept, or does it go before then?
I would say it's like watching documentaries with my mom and reading stuff with my mom and stuff, and then going to school and then being told that's not true. Like knowing that it's not true. Like I remember there was a moment with some family friends. Like I was at a sleepover or something, and those folks were talking about Egypt being part of Europe. Because it's, for some reason, all those amazing things that happened in ancient Kush and Kemet could not be associated with Africa, right? And I was telling them, I was like, nah, you're wrong. Like, Egypt's in Africa. And I remember them getting mad, like they were yelling at me, like, no, you're wrong. Like they couldn't have it. And so what they did, they actually put me in a timeout. And I'm like a little kid, I'm maybe like 7, right? And they put me in a timeout. But their issue is, like, my mom spent a lot of money, like, building me a little library. And they messed up when they put me in a timeout in the library. So I went in the encyclopedia.
And you found.
And I took it, and I went back. I still remember this. I went back to the kitchen, and I held that encyclopedia. It was heavy. You know those old, I almost swear, those old encyclopedias, like Britannica and stuff back in the day? This is in the 90s. I took that encyclopedia on, bam! Slammed it on and I was like, look! I was me at that age. Like, I've always been like this. And it said that it's in Africa, and they were just shocked.
Did they apologize?
I don't remember. I just was so mad.
Yeah,
because it's imagine. Like, I know why. It's like, they're sitting there, and it's like, why are you not associating all those wonderful things with me? Mm. Because for me, Africa is not a fantasy. It's me. Right? Like, we did that. No matter, I don't care who wants to say what. Right? The pyramids weren't created by no alien or nothing. Right? Yeah. All of a sudden, it's Black genius, and there must be some, you hear all other explanations, right? Like, nah. Even in the face of all of that, you have to resist. But that just shows, right? There's the lie, and then there's the truth, but how empowering it was for me to even know that. Now, what if I just sat there and accepted it and I didn't know, right? But what I understood at that age is that, especially growing up in a predominantly white town.
Mississauga?
No, before that I was in Milton.
Okay.
For a little bit. But okay. My parents were around a lot of white folks. And so it's like constantly not knowing and devaluing the things associated with me, but always propping up the things associated with you. And I saw that at a very, very young age. So I'm like 7 or 8, right?
I can understand the emotions.
Yeah.
It's disrespectful. It's
Yes.
insulting.
Completely, because we're only seen through a little peephole of a stereotype, right? Constantly. And I'm knowing how important those truths are to me, because it's so hard to come by. So whatever I knew, I held on to,
Yeah.
right? And even like growing up, like there were no books really in our library with Black folks in it. So I think at that age, that's why one of the reasons I really connected to Indigenous books and such, because they were brown people in those books. And I was like, well, that's close to me, so I'm gonna rock with that, right? And then you're also, being told different things. Like, I'm a huge hockey fan from a little kid. I used to like hockey because I watched Hockey Night in Canada with my mom, and we both would enjoy the fighting. You know what I mean? And I'm realizing how much that lady's influenced me. Like, even like we'd be watching something like, she used to love Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. I don't know if you remember that show, right?
Yes.
And she'd be always cheering for the Indigenous folks. Like, they're too wicked. Look what they're doing to them. Like, right? Fight them. And so, but it's like that understanding, because we're also like looking at, we're at the library and she's getting videos on, the civil rights movement and stuff. Like, it's, she's coming from Grenada, where they killed, Maurice Bishop, and Revolution, and even here, like Concordia's down the street, and what happened, like the connections with the Jewel movement and Franklin Harvey, right? Huge Canadian hero, Grenadian Canadian hero. It's my mom's cousin, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right. And so it's cool now being here on this campus all those years later, after he was doing what he was doing here in Montreal in the 60s and 70s and beyond. And so it's just that continuation of that connection to the resistance to anything that would devalue who we are. That's disrespectful, right? That's disrespectful, even when you understand history and seeing how much of Europe would not be so without us, right? Come on. We all should know.
Yes.
Right? We all should know. Right? We all should know. We all should know about the Moors and their influence on Europe. We all should know. So it's not like a retribution thing. It's, unfortunately, the revolution is just telling the truth sometimes.
Could you describe a moment in time or an incident? Maybe what you described relates to this. Maybe there's another one. An episode in your professional or everyday life where you had to justify the importance of using history for attaining a goal or for making positive social change through your work. What was your justification for using history?
I think even just for me, I won't even think about a class or a project, just for me as a human being, right? I'm thinking about, there's a longer story to get into this point, but being the child of folks that immigrated to Canada, right? So you leave the house and you're always asked where you're from, right? And I have a few friends, who are descended from, ninth generation Black Canadians. And they're still asked where they're from, as if they couldn't be from here, right? Because also the knowledge of their families and their realities are not centered as much, right? And then you go home and you're told you're Canadian all the time. Oh, you're Canadian, you're lucky, you're Canadian. So I'm like, what am I? And so I think I really connected to the stories of like African Canadians who have been here for a long time. Because like, okay, you're Black like me and you're Canadian. And there's this kind of milieu, this kind of mixing that happens. So I think even just for me understanding what it's like to be a Black person and what it's like also to be Canadian, and also understanding even in this moment that it's not something initially that I even chose. It was put upon me, right? So where are you from? What does that mean? Like, you can't be from here. Okay, cool. So this place is not for me. But at home, you're told, like, look at all we did to come to Canada and all we go through. And you're like, okay, cool. So I guess I am this kind of Canadian thing, right? And so understanding, you're like, okay, cool. You got, Africville in Nova Scotia. You got, early black settlements in Oromadate around Muskoka and stuff, right? And like, okay, cool. There are other folks that have been here a long time and are understanding, right? Because my parents are coming from a place where they had black teachers, black presidents, black cops. Like, the cops beat you up is maybe because you're poor, you know what I mean? Or they don't like you, there are other reasons. But here, do they quite understand what it's like to be a black person born here? And they didn't at the time, right? And so understanding the history of blackness in Canada and the long-standing history, the folks in Windsor, you know what I mean? Essex County, the Grand Central Station for the Underground Railroad, connecting with their stories, connecting with folks like, Oscar Peterson was huge for me. I was a young piano player, and I also loved his middle name was Emmanuel too.
Oh.
Just like Dennis Brown, right? Dennis Brown's middle name's Emmanuel as well. Right. And shout out to my brother, Juju Rogers. His middle name's Emmanuel. And we go on. But those little connections when you're trying to establish your identity is, or where you, even, like, I'll even ask us this, right? Like, how much of our identity is trying to figure out where we fit in and where we're told we don't fit in? And then, right, how much of our identity is just understanding who we are authentically? Right. So it's you come out being a little different than what folks tell you are, because some white folks are telling you you can't be black and like hockey, and some black folks are telling you, well, if you like hockey, you're white. So I'm like, no, I'm black and I like hockey. Period. Shout out to like folks like Mark Frazier and Wayne Simmons and the work they're doing, with the Toronto Maple Leafs and stuff, particularly during Black History Month, because it feels like restorative for me, because the first time I was called the N-word was playing hockey, right? I'll never forget that. So it's like, it's this thing that's beautiful to me that I love, but, when you show up to hockey, go see the Leafs or whatever, sometimes, it's less like this now, but definitely when I was younger, you go to a hockey game and folks are definitely staring at you, and you definitely know that you got to just focus on the game that you love, as opposed to like focus on the people staring at you, and how redemptive it was for me. Like, I've taken my eldest son to a Montreal Canadiens game and stuff, and like folks were cool. But growing up, right? Like,
it goes back to that space you were talking about.
Right. Exactly. The metaphysical, you got to create it within yourself. But it was like really cool to see. But is it like that for everybody still? Or was it like that for me? As a man in this body, right? Misogyny is a thing. If a black woman shows up with her child to a hockey game, what's it like for her? Particularly a black woman. So it's this whole, what is it? What is black life? And what are the varying experiences? Because we're not a monolith, right? They're black communities, right? So when folks are like, what does the black community think? I was like, oh, I don't know what a Sudanese immigrant who's Muslim is going, you know what I mean? What their experience is like, right? And especially if you're coming from somewhere that's predominantly black, you're known by other adjectives and other identity markers, right? Like Dr. Wad Ibrahim talks about, before he was known as a guy that liked basketball or the tall guy. And now he comes to Canada and you're black. And this is what it means to be black. And therefore, this is you. And then all of a sudden you just become the stereotypes they assume about you. And then your humanness. That's so dehumanizing. Where you're not known for who you are and nobody's taking time to know you for who you are. You know what I mean? Like, Africa's often still referred to as a country. Right? People are like, in Africa. Like, Africa's a huge place. It's bigger than North America. Right? You're not going to, I don't know, talk about the caribou in Texas, right? When folks are like, yeah, I'm going to go to Africa and see a lion. Well, I know folks from Ghana that have never seen a lion. The wild just coming up to you, right? And stuff like that. And so, but that's the symptom, right? There's intent and impact. Are people intentionally trying to devalue Africa? I don't think so. Maybe some are, yeah. I know some are, but others, the everyday person, maybe not. But it's how it's shown to them.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to history.
And education.
And education, right? The number of countries, different climates. You know what I mean? Africa's not a desert. You have rainfall. You have every climate. You have snow on Kilimanjaro. Like people skiing and also rainforests. And you have so many different ecosystems and people and languages and ethnicities. So what is a Black community then? Right? But by just saying the Black community kind of minimizes our experiences, one, but also I understand it because it's also coming from sometimes the way folks, you know what I mean? Like civil rights movement happened in America. And at that time, I don't know the numbers, so I guess, but I would guess that a large number of Black folks in America at the time were, you know what I mean? Were not immigrants, right? Like they've been there for hundreds of years. So then when you say the Black community in Philly, that might mean something different than in Canada saying the Black community, right? And even thinking about like Dr. Letitia Massaquoi and others, and think about Black feminist thought, particularly from Canada and what it means, and that transnational piece that is super important to that conversation on Blackness, particularly on this section of Turtle Island.
Based on what you've said, what do you think history is? What does it serve to do? Could you attempt to give a working definition?
I'll take a step back and history is a tool. It could be used to, and it has been used to inspire some people. It's been used to, it's powerful. I'd say that. But history is powerful. History is powerful because it could literally shape the social fabric and the social imagination of a place. Yeah, history is powerful, and it's a powerful tool. And if we are looking at history through equitably and really, I'll just say it, decentering whiteness, right? And we're not saying, when I say decenter whiteness, I'm not saying push white people away, but we're just join the circle. You know what I mean? Like join the circle that we're all part of and move out of the middle. And then we could see the true story and how it evolved and yet the continued resistance. And then from that point of view, you start to celebrate people. You start to celebrate Indigenous folks. You start to celebrate Black folks and Sikh folks that have been here for many generations, Southeast Asian folks, because what they've endured and yet they're still here. For me as a Black person, that makes me so proud because the more I learn about what was done to us, you know what I mean? Like taking our skin, making clothes, like the torture we've been through, and we're here and this magnificent. You know what I mean? Come on, man. We something special. We something real special. Because there's one student in class that said this, and she's like, some white folks are afraid of Black folks because they know that they could not go through what you went through and still been here and be here in the ways that you're here. I was like, whoa, okay. Oh, wow, right? I was like, who are these people that went through all of this and they still have the audacity to say civil rights, not even good rights or equal rights, civil, right? No, we're not leaving here until you fix this here situation. We're not moving, right? Come on. We something special. So, yeah.
So, based on what you just said, it seems that the relevance of history at a social level is intertwined with the relevance of history at an individual level? Is what you just described about history, is it more at the social level? How does it connect to the individual level? Is there a difference between the social and the individual, or the individual and the collective?
I think it's deeply political, right? Like even, I'm not going to try and quote Ozzie Davis. I don't remember the quote directly, but more so Ozzie Davis was talking about how Black life is always political, right? If you understand politics is the distribution of power, and what is power? I see it as money, right? Then our lives are always deeply political. So I think history is political because there's a specific reason why certain histories are being covered up. Why do we want Greece to be the starting place? Because you can't enslave a people that know that they did this, and they did that, and know they did this.
So there's this dehumanization process happening in a way.
There is, but also like, celebrate folks that are holding on to and know what their history is and are continuing to seek more and gather with other people and spending time, even in academia, when you're being told, like, that's not academic, that's not an academic pursuit. What is academia, right? Like, Dr. Rob Simon taught me, like, there's no such thing as academia. It's just literally the conversations you want to be a part of, and you join those conversations. That was deeply impactful for me.
So the political is imposed onto the social or collective, but it's negotiated at the individual level.
It is.
I'm trying to understand how.
I think maybe all the above, right? Maybe it's more fluid, but
because I'm going to connect this to the next question because I'm really curious to hear what you have to say.
Cool.
So when you talked about the first idea or image of history that comes to mind, you talked about the lie. And then we talked a little bit about resiliency. And in describing all the awful things that have been done in the name of history, or using history to do all these awful things.
But also talk about the beautiful things too.
Yeah, so I was curious. Yeah. So there's negative, but there's also positive. And I was going to ask you, is history both? Is it not both? And I want to connect that more to how is it conjugated at an individual level? Is the way we do history or think history at an individual level different from how we do history at a collective level, or are they intertwined? Because you talked about the political. So I was curious to see if you had any thoughts.
Yeah. I think history is a tool, right? And so, what are we going to use it for?
So the individual would use it as a tool. Yeah,
but then you're looking at how the collective uses it, or, you know what I mean? How the government is using it, right? To devalue certain histories or put it away, or like say it's not important or not true, right? Imagine that, your own experiences that, even thinking about, like, I had students who have ancestors that were killed in the Tulsa massacre.
Wow.
Right? And their stories and how, like the wealthy Black folks, the KKK and other folks, the cops and stuff, would break into the house before they burned it down and write a new will saying that that person left all their resources to them, and then kill that person and burn down their house.
Wow.
So then when you think about intergenerational wealth, somebody worked for that and you just took it, boom, and you're allowed to because there's no repercussions, right? Because I don't know who you're going to call when the people you're supposed to call might be allegedly part of that, right?
So that's interesting. So what I'm gathering is that the line gets blurry between the individual and the collective.
Especially depending on who you're talking to, too.
Interesting.
The people that are being devalued by the history, are being ignored by the history, are being oppressed by the history, or the people that are benefiting from that version of history. Thinking about like Steel Pulse, you know what I mean? Even like this year version, it's not a King James version. It's not the way that they told you, right? But even for me, right? Like, yes, I have an ideology, but then how does that reggae song now speak to me, right? This here version, it's not a King James version, right? It depends on which perspective, right? There's that proverb from, we're told is from the African continent. I'm just saying we're told because I haven't verified it and I'm on a podcast.
Oh.
But, the axe often forgets what the tree remembers. Right? So if the axe is telling the history, that's different than what the tree will tell you. Or, right now with the election and, indigenous folks are holding certain people who are running for government or running for prime minister, trying to hold them accountable and talk about what life was like for indigenous folks under Harper, right? And when the response is like, oh, but he apologized, you take a step back and like, okay, take a plate, smash it on the ground, and apologize to it. What does that do? There has to be action, right? For some indigenous elders I've been around, like some of them, like even mentioning residential schools was, the government doing that was huge because for so many generations, residential schools were like ignored and indigenous folks are telling, no, you're making that up. Can you imagine going through what we know now? We don't even know everything. Well, just from what we know happened. Imagine you going through that and then being told it didn't happen.
It's similar to the story you gave about the encyclopedia.
Right. So that is the power of history, right? To completely erase, come on, right? I know older folks who were born and raised in Canada, neighbors of ours, past neighbors of mine, and they're like literally in their 60s and they're now learning about residential schools. So they grew up in a Canada where there was no mention of it. There was no mention of Africville.
So just getting back to the question I asked a little earlier, is describing history as a good or bad thing relevant to what you just said? Because it feels like history just it's a tool and it's used to...
History is like a shovel, right? You could use a shovel to plant trees and plant gardens, beautiful flowers, but you could also use a shovel to hurt somebody, right? It's just the intention of the person. We got a garden that we feed our kids over the summer. We're growing vegetables. It's a lot of fun. It's educational. Couldn't do without a shovel, right? But people have been harmed by shovels too, right? And so I think it's history, in my opinion, the greater conversation is what is history being used to do and by whom and why. That's how I'd say it. Yeah.
Emmanuel, Tabi, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.